Boa noite and good morning. Welcome everyone. My name is Cassia Hare and I'm the Education Counsellor at the Australian Embassy in Brazil, and I'm so pleased to welcome everyone to our event tonight. This is our second Australia-Brazil virtual research collaboration, and tonight's theme will be oceans. This is the second event we've hosted under our Memorandum of Understanding signed between CONFAP and the Australian Education Department, aimed at connecting researchers in Australia and Brazil to support them to develop projects together and eventually, hopefully, apply for funding. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge Professor Odir Gelagostam from the National Council of State Funding Research Agencies, or CONFAP, Miss Alison Dell from the Australian Department of Education, Miss Katina Argueta, resident representative in Brazil for the United Nations Development Program. I'd also like to acknowledge our keynote speakers, Dr. Milton Camper from the Brazilian National Institute for Space Research, Dr. Beth Thornton from the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, and acknowledge the work of the team in pulling this together, Flavia, Chris, Louisa and Marina. So tonight's event, I'll just run you through how we're going to work this briefly. We're going to have some welcome notes from the representatives from our key institutions. Then we'll hear from our keynote speakers before moving into breakout rooms where you'll have a chance to connect with each other, hopefully throw out some really good ideas. We'll then report back from the breakout rooms before closing the session. So I'd like now to hand over to Professor Odir from CONFAP. Welcome, Professor Odir.
Thank you, and boa noite and good morning to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, to see so many people, some colleagues and friends interested in establishing connections between, or establishing, or I would say, strengthen connections between Brazilians and Australians. I'm going to share my screen and show a couple of slides for this introduction message. And it is. So I'd like to talk a little bit about CONFAP. CONFAP is the Brazilian National Council of State Funding Agencies. We represent all the Brazilian state funding agencies. We are a non-profit organization set up in 2006. And we represent 26 research funding agencies. In this Brazilian map, you can see where these agencies are, one for each state. And our strength is our capillarity. We have a wide spectrum of actions, and we acknowledge regional differences. We have national partnerships with federal agencies like CAPES, CNPq, FINEP, Embrapi, and others, and several international partnerships, one of which is Australia. We've signed this Memorandum of Understanding between CONFAP and DESE on December 2020. And we aim to support research projects, exchange researchers and students, support seminars, workshops, and publications to promote the results of joint activities, and also the development of coordination of other joint activities. All the 26 state funding agencies are participating in this agreement. And how to request support. This is a little bit different from other partnerships that we have established with international countries. Normally, we launch a call for application, a joint call for application. In this case, this is the way is a little bit different. The research project or activity must first be approved by an Australian research fund or university recognized by DESE. The Brazilian coordinator must send an email to CONFAP in order to verify the support of the FAP from his or her state. And each FAP will decide individually or in partnerships in consortium with other FAPs, the budget allocated to each individual project. FAP may include its own steps and criteria when deciding to support a joint project according to its internal regulations. And the coordinator will be informed regarding all these requirements. CONFAP will then inform DESE regarding the FAP's decision. And this is the website, the CONFAP website, where you can find further information, or you can send email to Flavia, who is also here, through this email address to inquire to get more information about this opportunity of funding from the state agency. So this is the Brazilian state agency will fund the Brazilian part of the project. It doesn't have to be a 50-50, it has to be equivalent to the effort made by the Brazilian partner in this research project. So we are happy to be here and to be part of this virtual research collaboration effort. On this occasion, focused on ocean related research. And we thank you all for being here. Thank you, and I wish an excellent program, an excellent workshop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gia. I'm now going to hand over to Alison Dell, who is the branch manager of the International Partnerships branch in the Australian Department of Education. And I'm going to share some slides for you, aren't I, Alison?
Marvellous, that would be excellent. Thank you, Cassia. Good morning, everybody. Bon dia, I think is the correct phrasing. Speaking to you here from Canberra, where it's 7 degrees this morning, not -8 like it was yesterday morning. So we are in the depths of winter here, and it is very, very cold. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we are meeting. If there are other people from Australia here, I'm on Ngunnawal country, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Okay, Cassie's sharing isn't working. I'll see if I can.
No, that's okay. Chrissy's going to try and do it for us.
Oh, marvellous. Okay, so I am the Assistant Secretary of what's called International Partnerships branch in DESE. I've got a fairly broad range of countries that I look after. I look after lots of countries in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia, but I've also got Latin America. So it's a bit broad, and I'm still learning, but I'm very happy to welcome you here today, and I'm very happy to be here myself. I understand this is our second research collaboration event following our MOU that we signed, which Professor Delagostin also brought up. So that was lovely. And I'd like to acknowledge Professor Odir Delagostin from CONFAP, and who spoke before me, and Ms. Katia Argueta, resident representative from UNDP in Brazil. Our partnership with CONFAP and today's event aims to promote greater collaboration and connection between Australian and Brazilian researchers. And I know that research is such a long duration thing, so I really welcome everyone's full participation today. So we've continued to collaborate and strengthen our relationships during COVID. And since 2007, we only had 17 research agreements between Australian and Brazilian higher education institutions. But by 2020, this had grown to 135, and 109 of these were research collaborations. So that's really great. Our top 3 areas are medicine, physics or astronomy, and agricultural and biochemistry sciences. How are we going on the sharing, Cassia?
Not well.
Hang on.
We're having some problems on our end.
Oh no.
Oh wait, here we go.
Marvellous. I'll just wait until, there we go. There's the slide I'm talking about. I'm hoping everyone can see that. It's quite small on my screen, but I'm on a laptop, so hoping people can see that a bit better. In terms of our collaboration impact, our citation impact together is much higher than what we would be if we were individual. So our category normalised citation impact for Australia is 1.48 and Brazil's is 0.83, but together our joint publication rate is 4.09, so it's much higher. In the last 10 to 15 years, we've recognised the value of cooperation with each other and formalised that with the MOU with CONFAP. It streamlines funding access for Australian research to collaborate with Latin America's most significant partners. And it was good, Professor Otto-Gostin, that you outlined how to do that earlier. So just a bit, next slide, please. Just a bit of background about how the Australian government funds research. We have block grants and we have competitive grants. So block grants are provided to universities according to their annual performance in research and how many research students they have. And so they're block grants and they're allocated to individual universities, and then they just disseminate that within themselves. And the research training program under the block grants supports research students, doctorates and masters, and the support program, the research support program, the second box covers the costs of doing the research. So one pays for the salaries and the other one covers the costs. The government also runs competitive research grant programs, and they are funding provided to our National Research, the Australian Research Council, the ARC, and the National Health and Medical Research Council, the NHMRC. And again, that is funding that is provided to those agencies, and then they are awarded by those agencies individually. And they are also highly competitive, and they have a strong element of peer review. We also have a couple of other things. We have a strategic university reform fund, which is about linking to communities. We have a national infrastructure investment plan, and we also have a big thing called the CRC program, and there's a number of what's called cooperative research centres around Australia, and they are basically industry partnered, and they are to solve problems, and they're very long term, they're up to 10 years. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. So thank you very much for having me for my short presentation. I wish you all the best for your workshop today, and I hope that it's very fruitful and that the research partnerships will continue. So thank you and obrigado.
Obrigada, Alison. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to welcome Ms. Catarina Argueta, the resident representative in Brazil for the United Nations Development Programme, to make some remarks.
Thank you very much. Professor Odir Antonio de Lagostin, President of the Brazilian National Council for State Funding Agencies, Madame Alison Dell, Assistant Secretary of the Australian Department of Education, Skills and Employment, Ms. Cassia Hall, Education Council of the Australian Embassy in Brazil, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to start by thanking our host for inviting UNDP to this event and granting me the opportunity to share this stage with such distinguished personalities. The Brazilian navigator Amir Klink said, "The sea is not an obstacle, it is a path." And this is illustrated very well the theme of this 2022 Australia-Brazil Virtual Research Collaboration Edition. The ocean defines the history, economy, and culture of many coastal countries. It is estimated that more than 3 billion people depend on marine and coastal biodiversity for their livelihoods. For us, humans, the ocean is life. But the world's oceans are facing a multidimensional crisis driven by overfishing, pollution, especially plastic and nutrients, habitat loss, invasive species, and climate change. Ocean acidification, warming, and loss of oxygen. According to UNDP, estimates the annual socioeconomic cost due to ocean mismanagement amount nearly $1 trillion of American dollars. Certainly, oceans are not dying, although the data collected indicate that we must use these resources in a more sustainable way. Marine health is vital for our survival and for our planet. Healthy oceans are a necessity for a healthy planet. More than 80% of our ocean are not explored or mapped. Scientific knowledge and research in these large bodies of water is crucial to the restoration of the marine environment. Currently, ocean research remains poorly funded, with an average of less than 2% of national research budgets. The United Nations General Assembly decided that the decade of the ocean science for sustainable development will begin in 2021. Enhancing ocean science can help us over the next 10 years to address climate change, marine pollution, degradation of the marine ecosystem, and ocean floor acidification. This decade established a common framework for science through universities, foundations, think tanks to contribute along with the efforts of countries to strengthen in research aiming to improve ocean sustainable management and to fight against climate change. The sea and the oceans are the blue lungs of the planet. They are capable of absorbing more than 90% of the global warming excess. This decade is a unique opportunity to involve the research and scientific community in the task of achieving sustainable development. Our challenge now is to restore the ocean's capacity to halt biodiversity loss, to create a sustainable maritime environment, to meet the Paris Agreement, and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. To strengthen ocean science capacity is essential to better understand and move forward a more sustainable planet. And to exchange information, experience, and share research ideas is crucial to promote science-based innovative solutions. From UNDP, we would like to highlight the importance of the work that the Australia-Brazil Virtual Research Collaboration is undertaking under this initiative, and to recognize the contribution of research institutes, universities, foundations, and also of citizens themselves to join forces to recover our sea and oceans. We are all in the same boat. We need the oceans, and they need us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Katina, for your inspirational words. And I'd like to thank you again for the support of the UNDP for our event. It's so nice to be coming together with you and trying to join up the initiatives that are happening to try and advance the important area around oceans. So thank you so much. Now we are going to move on to our keynote speakers. We're going to have two keynote speakers tonight who will speak for 10 minutes each. The aim of this session is to help inspire the group and to promote discussion for today's event. Our first keynote speaker is Dr. Milton Camper, Senior Researcher at the Brazilian National Institute for Space Research and Acting Coordinator of Earth Observation. Thank you so much, Dr. Milton.
So thank you, Cassia. I think I will share my screen now and maybe close my video to share, to save a little bit of the bandwidth, okay? Are we okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so good morning and good evening again to everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Milton Campo. I am a satellite oceanographer from Brazil. I would like to thank the organizers for the honorable invitation to participate as a keynote speaker in this Brazil-Australia collaboration and networking event, focusing on the theme about ocean. Also to all distinguished and brilliant audience. So observational and computational technological advances are transforming our ability to study the global ocean from a more integrated and dynamic approach. So this enhanced understanding of the ocean becomes increasingly important in our economically and geopolitically connected world, informing decision-making on vital issues. So the basic idea here is to present some activities and comment on some aspects that may be relevant to the Brazil-Australia collaboration on oceans-related research, seeking to further expand the partnerships, collaboration, and capacity development according to common interests, and assisting these VRC network stakeholders to stay active, connected, informed, and inspired. So I'll briefly introduce who you are and what we do, and I was asked to present a brief overview of the theme and the thematic axis, also to comment on the benefits with research collaboration, experience of collaboration between Brazil and Australia, and on opportunities. So the National Space Research Institute is a civil body of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation of Brazil, completing 61 years in 2022. INPE's priority engagement areas include the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. After its restructuring in 2020, the areas of Earth observation, Earth system science, meteorology, and climate were integrated in an Earth Science General Coordination, where I work in the division of Earth Observation and Geoinformatics. So at the institutional level, we build a family of Earth observation satellites. We have the capability and infrastructure for satellite tracking and control, not only our own satellites, but also international missions, with a ground segment to receive, process, archive, and distribute satellite images and derived products. We also develop geo-tools for image and data processing and analysis, making a continuing effort in education at the graduate and extension levels, but not undergraduate so far, also organizing and participating in technical scientific outreach activities and events. Research, development, and innovation activities are carried out in different topics such as oceanography in land waters, in the area of geoinformatics, including geographic data mining, digital image processing, and spatial analysis, among others. And more applied and technology projects and services even are provided to societies such as monitoring deforestation in Brazilian biomes, monitoring forest fires, weather and climate forecast and studies, the Terra Brasilis platform, and the Brazil Data Cube initiative. And our Monitoring Oceans from Space Lab develops efforts in studies on ocean color, coral reefs, mangroves, ocean atmosphere and land-ocean interactions, ocean climate variability, offshore wind power, inland waters quality, environmental characterizations, and monitoring. So the vision of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is the science we need for the ocean we want. So the Ocean Decade is a convening framework for diverse stakeholders to to co-design and co-deliver solution-oriented research needed for a well-functioning ocean in support of the 2030 Agenda. Capacity development, ocean literacy, and the removal of barriers to full gender, generational, and geographic diversity are essential elements of the decade. And our Ministry of Science and Technology are actively supporting the ocean decade. So the Ocean Conference in Lisbon this week comes at a critical time as the world is seeking to address many of the deep-rooted problems of our societies laid bare by the COVID-19 pandemic, and which will require major structural transformations and common shared solutions that are anchored in the SDGs. So to mobilize action, the conference seeks to drive much-needed science-based innovative solutions aimed at starting a new chapter of global ocean action. So although the term blue economy has been used in different ways, it is understood here as comprising the range of economic sectors and related policies that together determine whether the use of oceanic resources is sustainable. So the concept of blue economy integrates an approach to the economic exploitation of the resources of our oceans, lakes, rivers, and other water bodies. So alongside the green economy, it represents a basis for rational and sustainable use of natural resources, both renewable and non-renewable. And there are challenges, and they are not few. It's worth mentioning that it's important to understand and better manage the many aspects of ocean sustainability, ranging from sustainable fisheries to ecosystem health to pollution. Another important challenge relates to the realization that the sustainable management of ocean resources requires collaboration across nation states and across the public, private, civil sectors, and on a scale that has not been achieved yet, at least in my opinion. So the idea here is to bring together Brazilian and Australian researchers on topics of common interest. Both countries have immense marine territory demanding significant mapping, characterization, and monitoring efforts. These objectives require the training of specialized personnel and the use of approaches at multi-temporal and spatial scales, making use of different methods of ocean observation and numerical modeling. Strategies and good practice for the exploitation of marine resources must be adopted in a sustainable way, and both countries have to learn from each other in different complementary areas. So INPE already had a relatively long experience in the space area, having developed, launched, and operated Earth observation satellites. Australia is developing a water observation mission, and both countries can collaborate in this area. Brazil also has an infrastructure for integration and testing of missions, control and tracking of satellites, and in the segment of applications that can be certainly shared with Australia. Australia is developing a water observation mission, Aquatech Australia, and both countries can collaborate in this development. Sustainable management of marine resources under changing climate conditions and ever-increasing anthropogenic activity in the coastal and marine zone is a common challenge both in Australia and Brazil. Australia has experience in the application of satellite ocean observation data on different topics, such as coral reefs, water quality, mangroves, among others, which are also of interest to us. One of the major impacts of climate and anthropogenic change is to water quality in the regional oceans and inland waters. Degrading water quality induces significant stress on marine habitats, such as coral reefs and seagrass meadows, forcing flow-on effects on fish population reduction, invasive species introduction, and impact on species diversity. And disruption to coastal marine ecosystem functioning results in socioeconomic loss to the human populations that depend on the marine resources for employment and recreation. Australia has an advanced data cube infrastructure, and Brazil has recently started in this area. In fact, after the visit we made to CSIRO at the end of 2019, we had the visit of CSIRO colleagues based in Chile to INPE. There were also interactions with Geoscience Australia, and there is a current collaboration with the Australian-led Digital Earth Africa project. So the effort today has been more focused on land use and land cover, but we hope to aggregate water data from the coastal zone and inland waters in Brazil, at least, taking advantage of the experience already available in Australia. So the ocean holds many of the solutions that we are needing, such as improving global food security, reducing climate and weather risks, providing clean energy, and increasing economic growth through blue economy sector. So understanding the complex cause and effect on actions between ocean process and sustainable development solution requires new approaches offered by recent advances in high-performance computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and digital ocean analysis and prediction systems. So co-designing these tools to deliver the target information needed for policymakers and also to achieve the SDGs requires a dialogue between prediction system developers, SDG experts, and the ocean governance sector. It's only through synchronous layers of capacity development, from entry-level approaches for the wider public to knowledge sharing between experts and high-level decision makers and government officials, that the diffusion of ocean knowledge will turn, or maybe will turn, into ocean actions. We hope to be able to stimulate and put into practice the exchange of students and researchers between Australia and Brazil. And as blue carbon holds great potential as an ocean-based solution to climate change, while also generating a broad array of co-benefits, it still requires good governance and cross-cutting partnerships to ensure credible long-term project results that engage with the best practice principles for a blue carbon market that could be sustainable and equitable. So the ocean is an important source of climate solutions. It is also critical to global economic development and the achievement of almost all the sustainable development goals. We could join forces to help the development and deployment of clean offshore energy, decarbonization of offshore oil and gas and also shipping sectors, and create opportunities for action at local, national, and regional levels to move from commitments to action, so to directly help reduce emissions and address ocean warming and acidification. Before closing, I'd like to thank the Print Capes program that made it possible for me to visit the CSIRO in Canberra and Brisbane, and my CSIRO colleagues, Nagu and Tim, among others, for their receptivity and willingness to interact, as well as for discussing future possibilities for collaboration. Thank you. Obrigado.
Thank you so much, Dr. Milton, for your presentation. I think it's a really good setup for the rest of the event to have people thinking about the collaborations already underway and some of the areas that are good for us to move forward and work together on. So thank you. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Beth Fulton, the Senior Principal Research Scientist with the CSIRO Oceans and Atmosphere, who is leading the Integrated Marine Management and Research domain. Thank you, Dr. Fulton, and welcome.
I'm happy to talk to you this morning. Would someone be able to enable screen sharing so I can share my slides? Would that be possible? There we go. Okay. So hopefully now you can see the presentation slides, yes?
Yes, we can.
Cool, great, thanks. Yeah, it's great to speak to you this morning from Lutruwita, Tasmania. And I'd like to outline the challenges that we face, but also how we can join together to create some solutions. So I join you today from the lands of the Muanina people, and I'd like to pay my own respects to those elders and those who haven't made it to elder status, and to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community of today. So just thinking about the oceans that we use along all of our coastlines, the traditional view of most people who think about the oceans is that fishing is pretty much the only way that we use the oceans, but the actuality, the reality is very different. There's lots and lots of different things that we need to think about, from climate change through to all of the different sectors that interact with that ocean, whether it's mining or tourism or food production. So the best way to think about it is pretty much that anything that we used to do on land or have done in land for the last 10,000 years is now starting to be done in the ocean in an ever increasing amount. So it's an exponential growth. There's more and more activity in the ocean all the time. So to give you a little bit of a sense of that, I was born in 1973. So this is the level of change that has happened in my lifetime. So there's many different ways that climate change is influencing the ocean, whether that's from intensifying storms and increasing water temperatures through to change nutrient layers, increasing hypoxia, which is low oxygen in the bottom waters, sea level rise. But that's in the context of a great deal more change. So in my lifetime, there's been not only a 2 degrees increase in temperature in my part of the world, there's been a 30% increase in acidification, a 90 times increase in extreme events. You know, there's just a litany of things in the natural world that have increased, but the human use has increased enormously. So you can see that fishing has actually been one of the smallest increases in the oceans over the course of my life. Shipping in particular has increased enormously. And the demand that's coming with online shopping and things that we've learned to do during COVID is just putting that pressure ever higher. And that's part of the reason why the UN pushed for the Sustainable Development Goals, which is just trying to think about a better way to live on the planet, and has seen this current decade declared not only the decade of the ocean science, but also the decade of ecosystem restoration. So if we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, that was declared the world that we want by 5 million people in 88 countries. It's the single largest participatory discussion of the future we want as a planet ever held. And the ocean is central to pretty much every single one of those goals. For some of those goals, it's what you need to deliver on every aspect of the goal. In others, it's just supports a small part, but it is really critical to all of them. Sadly, though, that's not on the radar of many of our leaders. So it's actually has only 5% of the leaders of the planet listing it as an important SDG to be thinking about. And that's really sad, because if you think about where we sit in the Southern Hemisphere, we are the ocean hemisphere. You know, we're surrounded by oceans, we have maritime neighborhoods everywhere. And the sad reality is that a lot of historical science has come from the Northern Hemisphere and doesn't have that ocean Southern Hemisphere perspective. Thankfully, though, the high-level panel for the sustainable ocean economy has realised that we need cooperative action to get better management of 100% of our ocean, starting with our national waters, to balance protection, but also to allow for production and prosperity. So it's not just about locking everything up, it's about finding transformational change to let us really look after the oceans, but to use the oceans in the way that ideally we should have used the land, but to learn from the mistakes we've made on land. So the issue is that if we've got all those different things now happening in the ocean, how do they interact? How do we balance those connections, understand those interconnections so that we can make the most of the world that we've got? Well, science is in a much better place to have that discussion now than when they started to exploit the land quite intensively, you know, hundreds to thousands of years ago. And the industrialization of the land didn't happen until about 100 years ago. But in that 100 years, we've learned a lot. So we're starting from a much firmer position to deliver sustainability. Now, the great thing is that as 2 large countries in that ocean hemisphere, we have the capacity to come together to help not only current researchers with all the great research opportunities that we've heard about already this morning, but the next generation of researchers too. And in 2016, right around the time of the Olympics, I was in Sao Paulo, actually with the IMBA, the international body that looks at the oceans, to help train researchers in a global summer school. So we were amazed by the Brazilian hospitality. It was a really wonderful 10 days. And in the course of that, we trained roughly about 60 young researchers in interdisciplinary methods. So where you're trying to bring together different fields to make breakthroughs together. So it's not just when countries come together that we make breakthroughs, as you heard in the introductory talks, but actually when you bring different disciplinaries together, you can really push things forward. And this was in particular to how do we respond to the climate pressures on the different countries around the world. Now, I'm happy to say even though it's only been 6 years, quite a number of the researchers that were at this summer school have actually gone on to already make breakthroughs and to start to lead significant bodies of work in their own right. So we've really had the capacity in that joint effort to leverage up that future generation and impact we're having. We've also seen that in the work that we've done together in joint research projects that have already been underway. And the GOALS project, which was the Global Understanding of Learning for Local Solutions. So taking lessons from across the world to come back and find things that would work in our local neighbourhoods, brought researchers together from around the world, but particularly from Brazil and Australia. And that was, again, trying to take lessons from the Southern Hemisphere and lead the way in finding solutions for the whole world. And the reason it was these locations were picked is you can see there's orange and red dots on that map. And they're hotspot locations of climate change. So you can see across both coasts of Australia and off the coast of Brazil, the ocean is warming much, much faster than the average. So we're the canaries in the coal mine, as we would say in Australia. We're the places that it's happening first that the rest of the world can learn from, but it means that we have to come to terms with those issues first. So the group, and I think this shows the kind of opportunities that are still out there. This was just the tip of the iceberg and what can be done. But we looked at, we ran courses in Brazil, South Africa, Australia, India, around ocean literacy, so helping the local communities better understand the oceans, but also to train up science, not just scientists, but science teachers and primary school teachers, secondary school teachers, so that we really can start from the really small children to appreciate the value of the ocean, but to also plumb all of those bright ideas. You know, scientists aren't the only people that have bright ideas. Everybody has some ideas. So working with local communities to actually find some options around how to respond. We also, there's a great deal that can be learnt from comparative analyses, where you look at the different situations in different countries to understand the physical drivers of what's happening in those places, whether it's temperature or ocean acidification, salinity, oxygen, but also to think about what the local communities are doing and how vulnerable are they, not only in the species of that local ecological community, but what are the vulnerabilities of the human community that might act as a barrier to being able to change in a positive way. And then using modelling, so I'm a mathematician by training, using modelling to understand what the future of the oceans, but also the future for those communities might look like. And that's where you can really inspire some action to change that makes a world that we all want to live in. And a part of that is understanding the governance. You know, how do things really run? Who controls what? Not just in a formal legal sense, but actually also in terms of our local traditions and the way that we think and the way that we do things. All of that can inform adaptation together, because the world is looking at a blue future. The blue economy is the fastest growing part of our economy. It's the biggest part of the planet. It will be a big part of climate solutions. So as nations with large ocean borders, we have shared challenges, but we also have shared lessons and shared opportunities to help not only each other, but actually the entire world in taking those lessons to find solutions that are very targeted to the different ecological communities, but also the human communities in these different locations. And I think this is the century, or this might be even just a couple of decades, where nations of the Southern Hemisphere, such as Brazil and Australia, can take those lessons back to the rest of the world to build a more positive future. So I think we have quite a lot of opportunities. And thank you for letting me speak this morning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fulton, for your presentation. It was really interesting to hear your perspectives on developing of oceans and how we can promote this in a sustainable manner, particularly given our shared interest and global positioning in it.